What is up, survivors? Today's mod review is going to be the No Untameables mod. Now, what does this mean? It means that you're going to be able to tame things that you wouldn't normally be able to tame. Pretty cut and dry, but there is actually a lot more to this mod. And I look kind of epic posing like this on this rock. I should do this more often. I look pretty good. Anyway, the No Untameables mod essentially means just a lot of the creatures that you can't normally tame in the Ark universe are now tameable. Now, there's a fully customizable ionize with a lot of this stuff, and there's also some extra cool stuff added to this mod as well, but we're going to go over the basics of the creatures that you're going to be able to tame out of here. You can see some that are located up on these rocks and some that are down here on the bottom. Let's start down here under the water with some of these. So one of the first ones on the list is the Ammonite. You'll actually be able to tame the Ammonite now, and it'll give you a couple of cool abilities. Obviously, it can swim, and you can actually ride on it like this. So it doesn't have to swim on the ocean floor like they usually do. You can actually swim around with them, and you don't have to you're not stuck to the ocean floor. So you can pretty much go anywhere in the water with these guys. They generate Ammonite bile in their inventory. You don't need to be on wander. They'll just avidly do this on their own. So it's a pretty simple process for the most part. They get a camo ability, which is kind of cool. It stops creatures from aggroing you for I think it's pretty significant range. But while you're riding it, and then you can toggle the camo range, so you can see it'll kick in essentially camo almost everything your tames, you, and itself inside of this area to keep your stuff safe. Keeps things from aggroing after it. Now, while we're going over this, there's aberrant and X versions of a lot of these things too, but we're just talking about the vanilla ones just because we try to keep the mod reviews not an hour long. So anyway, that's pretty much the Ammonite. And as you can see, this thing will have a gender on it, so that does mean you can breed them. These guys, to also note, the Ammonite's taming. You tame these guys passively. They are carnivores, but then their kibble of choice is actually the regular kibble. Obviously, they do not require saddles to ride. Next up on the list is the jellyfish. You know these guys. They swim around in the ocean and sting the hell out of you and bother you, and they always aggravate you, and you're constantly running from them, unless you need biotoxin, then you're hunting them down every now and then. These guys will come in a bunch of different shapes and sizes and colors as well. They'll have aberrant versions, all that good stuff. These guys, once tamed, will generate biotoxin in their inventory passively. Again, you don't need to be on wander. With these guys, it's actually kind of cool because you'll get different sizes of them. And they'll have a size profile, kind of like fish do. The bigger the size means the more biotoxin that it's actually going to develop over time. So bigger jellyfish are going to give you more biotoxin. You can also move these little dudes with a fish basket. So you can put a fish basket with it, and that way you can transport them back and forth between other places. You can still do the stun, but the stun is kind of based on the creature's drag weight. So the higher the drag weight, the less time they're going to stay stunned. And the stun doesn't dismount the players from larger dinos. You can also change the lighting, which is kind of cool on these guys too. You get the option to change the lighting of how bright it is. It can be like super bright. You can turn it back to the default. You can actually turn it completely off, which is kind of neat. These guys are also a passive tame. They are carnivore, and they require simple kibble to tame. Obviously, you can't breed these guys. You can't ride them or anything like that. Oh, you guys know these too. They run around on the bottom of the water, the little angry sea lobster things. They'll come in a bunch of shapes and sizes as well. You can breed these as well. You can't ride them. You can violent tame them or passive tame them, whichever one you want to do. But they are carnivores, and they will eat the simple kibble. They'll generate silica pearls and black pearls in their inventory over time. I just spawned this guy in a couple minutes ago, so I'm not terribly surprised that this doesn't have any in here. Like I said, they'll also come in random sizes. They do get some more custom colors to them, it looks like, as well. You'll see aberrant versions of these, all different sizes of them. That's pretty good for that. All right, so some of our land critters are smaller ones anyway. And we can actually start with, where'd you go? This little dragonfly guy. So you can actually pick these guys up once you tame them. They are breedable. You can't ride them, obviously. They just go on your back. They're a passive tame, and they're carrion, so they're going to want spoiled meat. That's pretty much how you're going to spoil. Spoiled meat's your best option. You can feed them regular meat, but spoiled meat is your best option. And they'll just kind of chill there on your shoulder. You can disable the constant buzzing noise, actually. The buzzing noise that they make, you can actually turn that off and on. And they can obviously be picked up and thrown around in your shoulder. This dragonfly guy actually has some active radar abilities too, which is kind of neat. Now, I'm solo out here on my private on a single player, so this really is only going to work for wild aggressive creatures. Basically, why this guy's on my shoulders, if I hit G, it's going to ping up aggressive animals in the nearby vicinity. And as you can see, it's pretty accurate, and it's got a pretty good range. It actually picked up the jerk bird out there as well. But it's only going to pick up aggressive creatures, basically, which is still kind of convenient. And it just pops right up, and it doesn't seem to be a cooldown. Well, it seems to be about maybe a 5-second cooldown on it, but you can use it pretty often. These are kind of cool. So these will detect other players' enemy dinos and unclaimed wild dinos that are aggressive. You can actually get them to detect the creatures that spawn in from drops. They'll pick up explorer notes and also corpses, and the colors, like that one was showing up yellow, the colors will actually be different depending on which category it falls under as well. Again, all customizable in the INIs, and then you all can also, we can check this dude here. We can also check his inventory here to, well, not his inventory, but his settings to change which ones we want to pop up and which ones we don't. Next up, we got the jug bugs. Now I have a water jug bug here, but obviously you could have the oil jug bug as well. They're breedable. It's disabled by default, so you'd have to change it in the INI option. Obviously, you can't ride them. They're violent tame, so you're going to have to knock them out, and they are herbivores. However, their food of choice is the plant species Y seed. And then also, if they're like the aberrant version, it's going to want the plant species Z seed as well. The Z seed as well. You better pick these guys up like you would pick up like a dung beetle or a snail or something like that. So these, other than the obvious, you can get water and oil out of these guys. They have an interesting defense mechanism, which means that they actually explode when they're threatened, and this is dependent on what they're actually carrying. So water jug bugs like this guy here, it'll give players this like soggy debuff thing, which basically screws up their hyperthermic insulation and then prevents them from being set on fire. But then it decreases their maximum stamina. And this applies to creatures as well. The oil one will actually set them on fire, dealing a small amount. It deals a small amount of damage, and it's a fire-based thing, so it's only going to work against creatures that obviously creatures that are immune to fire, like your fire wormers and stuff like that. They're not going to care, but that would be the oil one. But then there's like an element version of it as well that actually does like a radiation sickness thing, and you can counteract with like the radiation suit. So these guys are kind of cool little defense mechanisms. I guess it'd be kind of interesting to see how well they defend things if you hide them somewhere. Kind of booby trap your base with them if you have them. I think it's kind of interesting concept. Next up on the list is the glow bug. These guys are breedable. Again, not by default. You have to change that in the INI. You cannot ride these guys. They are a violent tame, and so you want to knock them out. They're herbivores, and obviously they prefer the plant Z seed from like the aberration style stuff. You can harvest them for charge just like you normally could. You can pick them up, carry them on your shoulder. You can actually dye these guys to actually change their color. And when you do, it'll like the color that they emit will actually change. So they're kind of like a light, they're kind of like a tile in like a S Plus and SS mod. You can change color of torches and lights. Kind of works the same way with those guys. But again, obviously you can get charge from them for your charge batteries and stuff, and then you can pick them up, carry them around on your shoulder. So kind of nifty. All right, Nameless. And currently, I think these guys are still kind of a work in progress, but you can actually tame these things. They are breedable. You cannot ride them, but they're violent tames that you want to knock out and then you give kibble to. They can summon temporary minions. They actually get the option to burrow, kind of like the Prolobias do. And they don't really get like a mate boost thing, but it looks like one does actually change itself into the kind of the big the pack kind of leader or whatever. Two weird conditions for the taming. Basically, when you find a pack of them, only the alpha one can be tamed. So the guy that looks like this is the only one that can actually be tamed at that time. And you don't want to have a charge light near it. So the charge light will actually reset the torpor on these guys. So you don't want to do that. Obviously, the highest level out of these two are the same level, so I guess it really doesn't matter. But typically, the highest level one would actually be the alpha. These guys kind of work like the wild ones do. They'll summon more to actually fight for them, and if they summon enough of them, they could potentially have a Surface Reaper King, bam, just show up on the spot. So these aren't too terribly different from how they pretty much act in the wild. All right, Seekers. Little squid faces. These guys creep me out, I'm not gonna lie to you. They are breedable, and they don't actually lay eggs. These guys are like a gestation. Cannot ride them. They have kind of a weird taming thing as well, and they are carnivores. They prefer charge light or plant Z grenades or charged lantern. Plant Z grenades or charged lanterns to tame them. So kind of a weird concept. They get a gliding ability when you put them on your shoulder. So like kind of like how your Archaeopteryx does, pretty much. But if you're not using any other mods, the Archaeopteryx will use your hands. This guy won't. He'll just ride on your back, and you can use him to kind of glide around and still be able to do stuff with your hands, so your hands are free actually. All right, don't land in the water. That'd make me look bad. All right, so taming these creatures, they're tamed with charge light, either by like kind of like throwing the plant Z fruits or using a charge lantern on them directly, and they'll be kind of aggressive towards you while they're being tamed. So it's like a weird semi-passive, semi-aggressive sort of tame. Basically, they need to be under the effects of that charge light, either by a charge lantern or the grenades, and then you kind of feed them stuff. So it's a little weird. But anyway, you have this cool glide ability. So taming, like I said, taming these guys can be a little bit weird. You can toggle the hovering by hitting R, so you just be able to drop, right? You just be able to drop from where you're at, which I kind of like. You won't have to worry about overshooting what you're trying to hit. So as soon as you're done gliding, you just hit R and you kind of drop. G will actually toggle the hovering on and off, so you don't automatically hover. You can turn this off so that if I jump off of here now, I don't actually hover. So you can pick and choose when you want to hover. And this just looks creepy on my back like this. It's bothering me. These things have always freaked me out. It's just squid faces, man, like little flying mini Cthulhus, and I don't know how I feel about it. I think all in all, it's just a dangerous concept. But if you want it, you can get it. Before we get on to a couple of the other creatures I want to talk about, there are some work in progress ones, things like the attack drones and defense units, and also the ants are all in like a current work in progress state. So definitely be on the lookout if you're using this mod for something that might be coming later on down the road. So we have a couple of big things to talk about, and we're going to need to get to specific places to spawn to kind of show you how these things are going to work. All right, the one we're going to talk about next out here is a little crazy. And yeah, it's a death worm. You can actually tame these. Let's get you to calm down a little bit. They do in fact have their own saddles, and you can in fact ride these things. So it's kind of weird. They kind of like work like they normally would. Like when you're out of the sand, you're kind of in this weird stationary position. But you get the option to burrow around and move around as if you were an actual death worm. And then you can just pop right back out and fight like you normally would. And as you can easily see, these things are, they're no joke. No joke at all. Taming these things, everything about them is going to be a little difficult. It's not what you wouldn't really consider it a good time. Can't imagine anybody would anyway. I mean, look at this thing. It's Harv. It's absolutely. Why'd you want this? Look at the mouth. Freaky looking. Not good. Anyhow, let's get back on track. So these are not breedable. Obviously, you can ride them, and they have definitely a weird sort of taming. And oddly enough, their preferred method of taming is to use, or their preferred taming food rather. Actually a death worm horn, which leads me to believe that these guys are cannibalistic, which is a little weird, but I guess when you look this angry, I mean, I get it. I totally get it. Anyway, so these guys obviously can be ridden underground, just like I showed you. They don't lose stamina while they're buried. They have an ambush grab attack when you hit C while you're underground that drags the victim underground and deals a large amount of damage. So that's a kind of a cool little, like an ambush ability that you can use from under the ground. They can wear hats. Don't know why, but they totally can. Taming these guys is a little weird. It's sort of like the squid. You got to make these traps. These gigantor traps. I'm gonna lay one down. Basically, they look like a bear trap, but I mean, they're just gigantic. They're death worm traps is essentially what they are. So you lay this trap down, you get a wild death worm to come out and come after you. So it has to get inside the trap, and it's going to get hit, and it's going to be immobilized for about 30 seconds. Then you passively feed it. So So yeah, so then you passively feed this deathworm horns. Pay attention though, because these things do eat a couple of deathworm horns at a time. So you're going to need a pretty good amount of these if you're trying to tame one of these dudes. Kind of a crazy thing. Can I pick this back up? Something to note, I also have some admin commands on too. But apparently while you're underneath of this, sometimes you'll actually start to lose oxygen underneath the ground like this. But a scuba tank can actually remedy that. But this thing is pretty nasty, as you can plainly tell. Anywho, deathworm, you can tame them, which is a little odd to me. Oh man, the leads. We all hate these things. Giant raft killers that annoy the crap out of us, right? Not exactly something that we like to see in the water, especially not when we have a raft. But you can tame them, and you can ride them, and these things got some cool features. They are breedable. Obviously, they are rideable. They are carnivores with a carnivore diet. They have a weird taming method. So, features, the things these guys can do, they can actually store creatures inside of its mouth. It kind of works like a cryopod where it's like frozen, like it basically kind of like takes the data of the creature and kind of stores it. But basically, essentially what happens is it stores it inside of the mouth. And with the, you can actually change the ionize once you have this guy on here so that they actually don't go after, rafts anymore. So if you don't like the idea of the things going after rafts or being able to do as much damage to rafts, you can actually change that through the ionize. I didn't realize quite how big this thing is until you're riding it. This is absolutely obnoxious. So we have regular left click like bite attack thing, but then we should also have a right click grab, which is what I'm going to try to do right here. Try to grab the shark. Oh, there we go. He's in my mouth. He's totally in my mouth, which is hilarious to me. So you can pick up wild critters and have them in your mouth too. So obviously I have a weight bar that goes up and I have 5 slots that I can use when I'm doing this. You'll actually be able to release these, and then you can actually like toggle the HUD of this, toggle this little mini HUD on and off. But you'll actually be able to cycle through the slots, obviously. Now, obviously, I only have 1 in here, so you can only see the 1 right now. But you'll be able to spit them out and get rid of them, which is pretty funny with the C option. So once you select it, hit C, you just spit them back out is basically what you're doing. But these things do a lot of damage. These things are pretty ridiculous. I'm spawning a level 225 in, obviously, but I mean, standardly, it's pretty cool. So once you actually get close to the surface with these guys, if you hit spacebar, they'll do this crazy breach thing, which is pretty neat. Like they actually do like the whole whale tilting thing. They're pretty fast in the water once they're tamed, but this is pretty neat. I kind of want to do this again. I could see myself having some fun with this. Taming these guys isn't what you would normally think. So you're gonna need to get a fertilized egg from these things, and they don't make nests. So yeah, they kind of carry them in their mouths, which is a little nasty if you put any thought into it. Pretty gross, actually. Pretty gross, actually. So. But basically, wild ones will occasionally have one of these eggs in their mouths, and when you knock it out, you can get to the egg. So you kind of just want to find one, knock it out, see if it's got an egg. Now, kind of our last but not least sort of thing. It's a Reaper, right? It's a Reaper, not a big deal. Take a look at that tail back there. It's not just any Reaper. It's a Reaper queen, actually. Now, typically, you could only get impregnated by the queens, and then you get a male later on. As you can see, the body style is a little bit different, plus you got the tail back here as well. They're still not breedable, but you can definitely ride them, and you'll be able to ride them underground. You can also impregnate enemy players, which is kind of a crazy thing to me. So these things are pretty much almost act like their vanilla counterparts. Obviously, I mean, you can't tame females, but they pretty much work the same way. Your right click attack will be these torpor throwing thorn things, which is pretty hilarious. It's kind of like a gigantor thorny dragon. You know, obviously the salvo and the coverage area is significantly bigger, which is pretty intense. Essentially, you would get these things the same way that you would get Reaper Kings. You just have less odds of doing it. So it still goes through the same, you need to find a queen, get impregnated by it, and gestate it or whatever, and then have a baby. But you actually have the odds of having a Reaper Queen versus a King. So same method, you're just not always going to get a King. Sometimes you're going to get a Queen. Now, odds are still in the favor of you getting a King over a Queen, but you can actually get one. You'll be able to move around underground with these guys. You still have the burrow ability. You can move around underground with it. come back up, do all that cool stuff. Come on, come on, come out of the ground. A cool little yell. Snake too. So jumping, these guys do still have the jump attack with the burrow attack. The only difference is that you have to enable it in the ionized. I think it ends up being mapped to the R key, or the R key basically swaps the space bar to either be the jump or the burrow. It kind of works just like a Reaper Queen does for the most part, which you would kind of expect anyway. Reaper Queen. So there's a lot of other benefits to running this mod. Like I said, you're going to get access to a couple of extra structures, especially stuff like we talked about with the Deathworm Trap, a fully customizable ionized to kind of change, pick and choose which abilities you want, and even be able to further customize some of these creatures a little bit more. We'll have a full link to the Steam Workshop page in the description of the video, so you guys can check that out at your leisure as well. There's special Aberrant and X versions of a lot of these creatures. This is a pretty cool mod. You also get chibi versions of some of the stuff as well. But again, definitely check that mod webpage out so you can see more in detail. They got a pretty cool guide about how this whole thing works. I'm excited about this one. This one's pretty cool to me. I mean, the idea of being able to tame some of the smaller stuff, like it kind of never made sense. Like some of the stuff never made sense that I couldn't tame, especially the Ammonite. Like I kind of got the jellyfish because it's a jellyfish. It's probably not that smart, but if I can, considering some of the other creatures you can tame out here, I could totally get why you should be able to tame an Ammonite, especially the lobster. And honestly, most of this stuff up here. And being able to tame it and have more creatures is really just more variety in general, and I'm all about that. But more options is actually a cool thing. Plus the ability, I don't know, to have like a little army of Nameless if you want to. Or if you're really centralized around doing a bug army, you could have some of the smaller bug stuff too, which is kind of neat. And I like the abilities. I think the abilities are pretty cool. Dragonfly one's probably one of my favorites. That active radar ability, that's super useful, especially depending on what map you're on. The Ammonite, the ability to camouflage your guys for you, makes it super easy. Man, if you just have like a nice little coastal area and you just want to be left the hell alone by angry dinosaurs, I mean, that's definitely the way to go with that guy. Plus, a lot of these creatures passively producing stuff for you. Not a huge fan of this guy. He kind of creeps me out, but that hovering ability, and typically I run something like KBD, like Kraken's Better Dinos, so that the Archaeopteryx works pretty well for me, so I'm hands-free. But being that I'd be hands-free with this and the ability to just cut the hovering on and off whenever I wanted to is kind of nice. Yeah, I think kind of everything adds in here. The ability to tame like the giant whale. I didn't really understand why we couldn't do that in official arc. And obviously get a Reaper Queen, you know? I like all that. The Deathworm is definitely crazy, but I love it as well. All in all, I think it's an awesome mod to add, and you guys probably should check it out too. It's not a big mod, seems to work well with other stuff. But that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all next time.